What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Fighting Words. I'm Bob Wankel. We don't have Anthony Sanfilippo here, but we do have Tim Kelly. So we've upgraded for the latest show here. Phillies are surging. We've got a better host on the other side. I'm excited. Anthony's still down in Key West, Tim, and I don't know if you know this, but apparently the Wi-Fi situation down there is like something straight out of 1992 because like Anthony can't connect.
Yeah, I have been informed of that, and I need Anthony to host Philly's Stoplight Sunday. So when he asked me to host this, I felt compelled to come on.
There you go. So I'm excited for this because you and we go back a few years now, and we shoot some text messages back and forth during the games, and I always like to pick your brain a little bit because you're kind of you're like as even keel as it gets. Like I've had like this evolution as a baseball observer. I went from psychotic fan to pretty straight Big J journalist, went down there, did the job, didn't really get too emotional about it. I thought it was very easy to detach from the rooting interest. The more you're there, the more you cover it, which I know you know. And now as I've stepped back again, I've kind of reverted back to crazy fan, and I use Anthony more as the journalistic perspective. But one thing I will tell everybody listening to this, and I'm sure a lot of people listening are familiar with your stuff on Pattison and back before Phillies Nation, but dude, Tim is a grinder. I mean, there is nobody that works harder down there than Tim. He is always there. He is totally dialed in. And I'm excited to talk to you today for a fresh perspective on some different things. And I think that this show right now, it's interesting that it comes during a time where the Phillies are playing so well. And I think it's very easy to go to extremes with this team where you feel like, it's the same old story. They have no shot, when in reality, they could very well win the division and maybe make a run in October. And then right now in this moment, you're like, this is looking like a World Series team all of a sudden. And it's a little bit easy to get caught up and swept away in that as well. So I want to work through all of the different parts and things right now and sort of take your temperature on how people should view this team, what's real, what's a concern, and sort of just do a full reset here. Let's, I guess, start here. You go back to August 2nd, and the Phillies had lost, a game on a Saturday to the Tigers. And going into that day, going into that Sunday, into the finale, they were a half game behind in the division. And you wake up this morning, and they're 6 games up on the Mets, and we know what they've gone through. I guess, like, I don't even know where to start. How surprised are you that this has happened and it's escalated in the manner in which it has? And do you kind of think that they have now cleared that hurdle and they're going to surge past them and this is over, or are they going to fumble again? Do you expect the Mets to climb back in? Like, how do you assess what the hell has happened in this division over the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that the Phillies are going to continue to play this well the rest of the way, and certainly the Mets aren't going to be this bad the rest of the way. But I talked to our mutual friend Mike McGarry last homestand, and I said, if the Phillies finish this road trip upcoming and they're up 5 games on the Mets, that's massive. Now, they may still finish this road trip up 5 games, but to be up 6 games right now, it's no, I did not see that coming. But I will say, for much of this season, I felt like the Phillies were a team that should be buyers. They're in the mix for the World Series, but it's just something felt off. Like it didn't feel like a World Series team. Since they've gotten Duran and Bader's added something for sure. They feel more like a team that I could reasonably see going into the playoffs as potentially the favorite to emerge from the National League, especially in a year where there's not like an obvious team.
I'm looking at some notes here. I did a little bit of research coming in. It's interesting. So if you go back to that day where they were a half game behind the Mets on August 2nd, Fangraphs gave them a 53% chance to win the division. And this morning it sits at 91.8. And so, I mean, things have dramatically changed and shifted in terms of the division dynamics. And I still, I've sat on this show for months and I've said the same thing. I think that they're somewhere between a 90 and 94 win team. I think that they could possibly win the World Series. I don't think they will. I don't expect them to. But in this moment, the one thing that's felt a little bit different, like they've won 7 of the last 8 games. They've had some good performances. The pitching's been really good. I believe over the last 8 games, they've given up 3 runs or fewer in 7 of the 8, 2 runs or fewer in 6 of the 8. Like that's sort of been their formula all along. What's been different, though, is you go back and you look at the game Saturday night. You get the big explosion Friday. Great. That's vintage Phillies. Saturday night, they lose that game. They don't come back in the 7th inning. It's not the bottom of the lineup that gets it done. Like, we have not seen that with this team. You see all the different situations recently where they've struggled to sweep. It had basically been 2 calendar months since they had swept the team. They get it done on Sunday. Last night is a stone-cold situational loss for that team. It's Taijuan Walker. They're facing Abbott, who's awesome. You don't have Duran. You don't have Strom. They fly in from Texas to Cincinnati. They have every right in the world to lose that game last night, and they were sleepwalking for 8 innings, and then boom. And like, these are the games they don't win, and that's the difference between being 20 games over 500 and being stuck in that 14 to 15 games over 500 rut or cycle that they felt like they were in for 2-3 months. Is this different? Like, is this really just the same team and we're just seeing some different breaks right now? Or do you really think what we're seeing from the bottom of the lineup and a little bit more of a competitive balance? It's not just Schwarber. It's not just Harper. It's not just like these core guys. You're starting to see things lengthen out a little bit. Like, is that real, or is this kind of just like a, hey, it's been a couple games. It happens over 162. Don't get too excited by it.
Well, I think it's real to an extent. Brandon Marsh is not going to continue to hit like this, but he's also a much better player than what he was at the beginning of the season. Bryson Stott, to me, has been the one that's really stood out these last couple of weeks, because he's performed like what I think most of us expected he would coming into the season. So I think he's really the guy that it hinges on. And then you're going to get Alec Boehm back. And for as much as Otto Kemp and Edmundo Sosa have done a nice job, and Alec Boehm can be frustrating at times, he's still pretty clearly your best option at third base. So, I think this team has you mentioned they're 90 to 94. That's what you've thought of them most of the year. I agree. And I probably would have gone closer to 90 than 94. But there's an energy with this team since Duran's got here and Bader's got here that feels more like a 97 win team. And that energy may fade a little bit as the newness wears off, but it may also, they may also just be hitting their stride at the right time. It's felt a lot this year like what it felt like. They swept the Rangers last year at home, and that felt like the Phillies were going to win 110 games at that time. And then they swept the Rangers this week, and it feels like all of a sudden, is this the best team in baseball?
Right. Well, it's interesting. You mentioned the different energy that they seem to be playing with since the trade deadline, since Duran showed up. You go back now this month, and it's still early. I mean, it's August 12th. It's not August 27th. It's not a full sample of a month long, but since they've basically reconfigured and reconstructed and upgraded this bullpen, they have a 1.63 bullpen ERA. That's third best in baseball. They have a .72 whip out of the bullpen, best in baseball this month, and 156 batting average against, best in baseball this month. And so as we're trying to parse through what's real and what's not, do I think that the Phillies have the best bullpen in baseball all of a sudden? I don't. But do you feel like if this is about winning a World Series, can this team win it? That's what all the talking points are. You turn on the radio. Do you believe? Are you on board? Like, that's what we always cycle back to, right? So let me just ask it to you plainly. Do you think that this current mix of bullpen arms is enough in October to win a World Series?
Yeah, I do. If you have healthy Zach Wheeler going into the playoffs, I do think that this is enough. And that's what it is. You're also going to have less, if any, scenarios where you're playing 3 games in a row. So Duran can pitch every game, basically, once you get to the postseason. So you won't have scenarios like last night necessarily. Some of it comes down to, like, what is David Robertson? He pitched last night. There were some – you could take away, depending on what your belief was coming into that outing on how David Robertson would fare, I don't think your opinions changed. There were some really good –
my takeaway last night was it happened,
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Right.
sort of what I saw.
So I think David Robertson is a 7th inning guy, and Strom and Kerkering, you got to figure out the 8th. But all of a sudden, if you figured out the 8th, it's a wrap in the 9th. And that could change, obviously. But right now, it certainly feels that way. And yeah, I mean, if you really trust Banks or if Romano pitches well, like all of a sudden you've got to
well, that's one guy I wanted to ask you about. So Romano comes in last night, trailing 1-0, and it was a quick inning. It was efficient. He looked good. He's going to be here, right? Like, there's no world where they'd say, like, let's move on. I still think that he represents one of their more, it's crazy to say it, I know the numbers, I understand it, but I still feel like he represents like one of their higher upside arms. Like, and the way that he was used last night is exactly how I'd like to see him used. If you're in a game that's competitive, a game that's still within reach, I don't mind going at him in the 6th or 7th inning of a game. If you're holding a 5-2 lead and you're in the 6th or 7th and you want to go to him to try to get a couple key outs, like, I have no issue with that. Turning it over to him in a 1-run game in the 8th, that's a different level that I don't really trust him in and I don't want to see him in. But this is where I give the Phillies some credit. I mean, the bullpen was so bad that we've kind of talked about it. Like Anthony and I have said in the past, like, I know that there's this feeling like when you look at the numbers and you get to this point in the season, you have to consider the DFA, you have to consider moving on. But I'm like, if you look at this current bullpen mix and what they've had for most of the season, it's I think it has some reluctance. You have to have some reluctance in moving on from a guy like him just because there is something in him and you do see it from time to time.
Yeah, if the month of May hadn't happened, I think it would be a clear DFA. The fact that he had a month where he looked lights out, I think you're chasing that to a degree, and maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't. It's one of the reasons you couldn't bank on it coming in the 8th or 9th inning. But if you're talking about can he pitch in the Jose Ruiz role from a year ago, yeah, I think he can do that. And if last night's any indication, like he's got a chance to turn things around. So again, it's one of those hope for the best, don't expect the best situations, but they don't really have like who, if not him, who is going to be into that role, I guess.
Yeah, all right. So there's a few things here that they have kind of coming up. And I want to talk about how they've gotten to this point and how the perception of the team is sort of changing in the moment. And like that's all fine and well, but people that listen to the show know that we're an anxiety-based podcast. Like, we talk about some of the things that you go, all right, well, like what's coming down the pipeline here? What are some of the things that should cause some level of concern in the moment? I guess I want to ask the biggest thing, because I think it is the single most important thing for this team right now in terms of its ability to compete in October, and that is the overall health of Zach Wheeler. And there's been a lot made of the declining velocity in recent starts. Certainly, he was still effective against the Rangers. He sort of gutted it out, but he was pulling a lot of pitches, it felt like at times. Where are you at with Zach Wheeler right now in terms of just, do you think that this is a situation where he will have to be sidelined at some point? Do you think it's a situation where there should be real concern about what's going on with him? Or do you kind of feel like that this is just something that he's going to be able to work through? I thought it was telling, personally, that early in that start, when you looked at the declining velocity, I said he might be out of here after 2 innings today. And the fact that he stayed out there, they don't seem to be, sounding the alarm in this moment. It kind of makes me feel like that they're going to try to work through this thing.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. To me, it's still wait and see. Like he pitched well on the standard of a regular starter last outing. He did not pitch well on the standard of Zach Wheeler. Like 51 out of the 83 pitches were strikes. I believe that's not Zach Wheeler. Coming out after 83 pitches is not Zach Wheeler. So I think it's still wait and see. Like, could we wake up tomorrow and the Phillies have decided to put it on the IL? Yes. And particularly if Aaron Nola is about to rejoin the rotation, maybe that makes even more sense. I just look back to 2022 when he had some forearm tightness late in the year, and that's usually like an awful, like this guy's going to end up having to have Tommy John type precursor for a pitcher. He didn't. They shut him down for a few weeks. He came back, and obviously in that postseason, up until the moment where Rob Thompson pulled him out in Houston in Game 6, like he was great. So I do think with this bigger lead in the division, you don't want to get complacent, but there is more of a temptation if you think shutting him down for 2 or 3 weeks can get him ready. The problem is there's not going to be much time to build up if you do that afterwards. So it will be interesting to see what they do, because obviously he's the face of the team, really. And it's a reminder, like everyone's talked about, oh, you only have through 2027. There's no guarantee he's going to be that good even the next 2 years. He's a 35-year-old power pitcher. So you only get so many cracks at it with a guy like this.
All right, let's assume for the time being that he makes his next start, he stays in the rotation, and even go so far as to say that he figures it out and everything kind of returns to as is with him. Aaron Nola is coming back, as you just mentioned. I guess, first of all, for people listening, what do you kind of see as the timetable for when he rejoins the team? And then how do you see the rotation shaking out from there? Like, what is the domino effect to that? I mean, Taijuan Walker, I know, is the obvious guy to come out. I just want to say, if you would have showed me on March 30th Taijuan Walker's numbers and said, hey, on August 12th, you're going to be talking about a guy who had a 3.39 ERA over 85 innings at this point. I mean, he has not been amazing. At times, you kind of have to hold your breath. But I give that guy a lot of credit, given what his 23 and 24 looked like and what he's been able to do and contribute to this team. And it is a real under the radar story. Like, we're 15 minutes into this show. I saw a lot online last night. Look at the Phillies, the big hit, Wes Wilson, Trey Turner. Don't win that game without Taijuan Walker last night.
It's one of the greatest one-year turnarounds that I can ever remember seeing. And I said that to someone even in spring training. I'm like, the fact that this guy's throwing 93 or 94, I didn't think he like physically was capable of doing that. And you've been in like post-game interviews with him. He is like, I hate the term pros pro, but he is that. Like, he is a good guy and he's a hard worker. And there are plenty of guys, myself included, that if I was pitching like he did last year, I would not have like been friendly to anyone. He was a professional. He talked to the media every time. Like, he remained on the top step, as they always say. So it's been an incredible story. And really, I think there's a strong argument, at least in the short term, for going to a 6-man rotation because he's pitching so well. He also didn't, I guess you could try him again in the bullpen, but there really didn't seem like there was much there when they tried him out in a relief role. He is still more of a starter. So I think you go another 2 weeks and maybe Zach Wheeler has to go in the IL, or maybe somebody else has to go in the IL, or maybe at that point you shift someone to the bullpen that isn't Taijuan Walker. But I think he's pitching well enough right now that there's not really a reason to take him out of the rotation. And look, if Zach Wheeler still wants to pitch every 5th day, then maybe you get creative and he pitches every 5th day, but Ranger and Luzardo go every 6th day, something like that. It would be difficult to follow, but it might be their best path. But you're right. Like,
Do you think that they would be inclined to do that? Because I think your argument's compelling. And again, it's like it just comes with this, like, you have to suspend disbelief for a moment. Like, I can't believe we're making the argument to keep this guy in the rotation, but like on merit, if you watch the games, you look at what he's doing. I also think that there's a part of this where I don't believe he's going to be effective out of the bullpen. I don't think that is a fit for him. And I almost want to applaud it even further, what he's been able to do because of the lack of plan for him. It's like, all right, well, you're in the rotation. Now you're not. Now you are. Now they've had no defined role for this guy. And he's just, whatever you've asked him to do, he's done it. I know he makes $18 million a year. I know that that's his job, but I think that there's something to be said for the way that he's handled it, the way that he's produced. Do you think that the Phillies would actually consider this?
Yeah, I do, in the short term, at least. Now, I don't know whether they consider the part of like having some guys go every 5th day and other guys go every 6th day, but I do think in the short term, especially if you're trying to nurse Wheeler a little bit and make sure he's healthy getting to the postseason and make sure Luzardo and Ranger don't kind of burn themselves out, which each has a history of doing. And then, like, you get to the point we've said all along, late in this season, maybe one of them goes to the bullpen. Well, it becomes a lot easier for one of them to go to the bullpen if you have 5 other guys that you trust. And I agree with you. Like, I didn't see much upside for Taijuan Walker as a reliever. I think he's a long man if he's out of the bullpen, and it's way more valuable to have him as a guy every 5th day going 5 or 6 innings, even if it's with a 4.5 ERA, which it isn't. But even if it's that, there's more value in that to me than having him just on for mop-up duty in the bullpen.
All right, let me put a bow on the rotation conversation with this. You get to a playoff series. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, they're playing in a wild card round, which right now they wouldn't be. Who is your Game 3 starter, considering everybody's healthy? Who starts that 3rd game for the Phillies?
Well, it's going to depend what Aaron Nola looks like coming back. Right now, my Game 3 starter would be Ranger Suarez, but Aaron Nola can certainly pitch his way into being that. And Jesus Luzardo could pitch his way into being that too if he gets on a tear like he was at the beginning of the season. He's difficult to figure out because, like, I see in theory what people think about him as a relief pitcher, but if he can't pitch with guys on base, like, I don't know how you're bringing him into leverage situations in the playoffs necessarily. So some of it does come down to, like, how do you best allocate people? And even if Ranger's your number 3 starter, if he's also like a better fit for the bullpen, maybe the thought is use him out of the bullpen and put Aaron Nola in for game 3, depending on how, because Aaron Nola, like, in a wild card series, I think if he's not one of your 3 starters, almost why is he on the roster type deal.
Right.
So, not to say, and Aaron Nola is not an ego guy that if, this was a lost season for him and he's just not picked, that it's going to forever damage the relationship. But there's a respect for Aaron Nola and what he's done. Like, I don't think in an ideal world that they would not have him pitch in a postseason series.
All right. Bullpen. Jose Alvarado is on his way back here. Obviously not postseason eligible. We all know this. How do you kind of see the utilization of him upon his return? Do they just throw him right into the fire and say, look, yeah, we know that you're not going to be part of the formula in October, but you're going to help us win these games now. Go get them. Or do they try to account for the fact that he won't be there in October, so they don't want to necessarily get overly reliant on him in high leverage situations? Like, how do you play this with him?
Well, I think he's not going to get used over Duran, Strom, or Kerkering. But after that, like, you have to get there. You want to win the division. I know Phillies didn't have success when they got the bye, but I'm still wired to think getting a bye and skipping around to the playoffs is still the best way to potentially win the World Series. So, yeah, you have to balance the fact that he's not going to be there in the playoffs, but you have to get there and you have to put yourself in the best position. And knowing you're not going to have him, you are inclined, I think, to use him to the fullest extent. Now, I would imagine they'll say we're going to ease him back in initially, but by the time the calendar hits September, like those last 3 or 4 weeks, I think you're using him wherever you need to use him, while understanding that you're not going to have him in the postseason. But it is like a difficult thing to balance. But he looked really good at the beginning of the season, and by all accounts, he's been really good at Lehigh Valley. So if you have him available to you, it's like, if you had a guy available to you that is a major injury risk, but he's healthy right now, yeah, he might get hurt before the playoffs, but in the meantime, you're going to use him to try and have success, and that's kind of the way I look at it.
What do you see with him long term? I believe he has, a $9 million club option next year. So I know when he was suspended, the news broke. It was like, well, this has obviously fractured this relationship forever. How can you trust him? You're obviously going to have to move on from this guy, wash your hands of it. I don't think that's the way this is going to go, personally. I think that was an overreaction in the moment, a very emotionally charged reaction in the moment. You think if he comes back up here, pitches well in September, helps them get to the finish line and win a division and see what happens from there, that they probably pick up that option?
I definitely think it's a consideration. Now, he's going to have to pitch well. Like, if the Phillies had that $9 million option on him after last season, I think they would have declined it.
Yeah.
But based on the way he was pitching early this year, which I get, again, comes with some level of an asterisk, it's like a no-brainer. Like, on the open market, you're talking about him getting multiple years for a higher average annual value. So it's going to come down to how much do they think whatever he took or took by accident or whatever the case is, how much do they think that contributed to him getting an uptick in velocity? And we'll see down the stretch how much it contributed, because there's nothing going on right now. So he is absolutely pitching for that. And even if the options declined, I think it's a $500,000 buyout. It's possible they could bring him back at a lower price. And maybe to some degree, like, he feels like he owes them one, if that's the case.
All right, now I want to get to the interesting stuff, the things that I think right now in this moment are the most compelling talking points. And it all has to do with the Phillies outfield. So there is this thing, like, Max Kepler won them a baseball game this weekend. And there's been this, like, you know how it goes, especially as someone that lives on the timeline. Oh, look, you got to credit Rob Thompson for sticking with Max Kepler. He came up big. My response to that would be, like, you absolutely do not have to credit anybody with the Phillies for anything related to Max Kepler. Like, yes, he helped them win a game the other night. There's two kind of conflicting thoughts I'm having about Max Kepler in this moment. So, yes, he has a big hit the other night. I still look at the numbers. Last 7 games, hitting 200 with a 227 on base percentage. Last 15 games, hitting 180 with a 236 on base percentage. Last 30 games, hitting 181 with a 269 on base percentage. And it's not like the slug has been off the charts either, right? But if you're thinking about postseason roster construction, Can you make the case, and I'm kind of curious where you stood on this one. Can you make the case that he provides you some degree of professionalism and thump as a pinch hitting option late in games, as a guy that still gives you the most pop from the left side against a right-handed starter in the postseason? Like, I don't think he's done enough to really warrant this like trust that the Phillies have in him. But if you just remove like the contract and how bad it's been aside, and you sit here on August 12th and think about what is our best way forward in October, is Max Kepler part of it?
Yeah, I definitely think he's in the consideration right now. And one thing I would point to, and I get it, it's a small sample size. In 35 at bats in right field, which is his natural position, we talked for years about how you got to get Scott Kingery back to his natural position, and all of a sudden
It wasn't Scott's fault. None of that was Scott's fault.
All of a sudden he'll be great. Well, Max Kepler at his natural position is hitting 400 with a 964 OPS, as opposed to left field where he's hitting 190 with a 652 OPS. Now, that probably means nothing, but I do find it interesting, especially as we get into some of these stretches where maybe I know Rob Thompson said over the weekend that, well, we're going to give everybody a day off because the turf is hard in Texas. And I do remember being there for opening day a few years ago and players complaining about the surface. So there's maybe something to that, but I also find it to kind of be a convenient excuse. And one you were bailed out on by the fact that you were facing Corbin, a lefty, on Sunday, because there's no other way you were taking Brandon Marsh out of the starting lineup. So I do wonder whether they consider platooning a little bit more in right field with Nick Castellanos, who we've all made and seen, and it's not just the metrics, it's also our eyes, that it's been rough in right field. If he's not hitting against righties, which I believe the OPS is like 710 this year, is your best lineup against righties with Bader in center field, Marsh in left field, and Max Kepler in right field, a position that he's fielded well at in his career, and maybe he's a little more comfortable there. I don't know. It's, again, probably nothing, but it is something small that I noticed that whenever he seems to be in right field this year, he's hitting a little bit better.
Well, it's an interesting observation to make, and it sort of perfectly transitions to the next talking point. The Phillies have been very platoon reliant, platoon heavy. We've seen it now with Bohm out at third base, in left field, in center field, and second base. One place that has not really occurred to this point is right field. And Nick Castellanos has been dreadful lately. Last night was hard to watch, just non-competitive at bats in key situations. His last 30 games, he's hitting 203 with a 230 on base percentage, only slugging 339. It's just gotten worse as you kind of shrink the sample. Last 15, hitting a .186 with a 200 on base percentage. Last 7, hitting 111 with a 111 on base percentage. He doesn't walk. The power numbers have not been off the charts. The OPS, I believe, is down to 714 for the season now. I think he's hitting 259. There was a time this year where he said, like, look, he plays every day. We know the defensive limitations, but he does give you some sense of a presence in the middle of the lineup. I was okay leaving him out there every day. After a horrible start last year, he kind of got it together. He was one of their better playoff performers last postseason in that short series against the Mets. I guess what I'm wondering, like, I watched the at-bats. Like, I remember like one of his family members said, like, watch the games when the whole Castellanos conversation came up about a month and a half ago for the first time. I don't know, man. Like, I watch the games and I just see these at-bats, and in real time, I'm like, I think it's getting harder and harder to make a case for this guy as an everyday player. But I do wonder, is there enough of a track record? Is there enough of, like, he's still one of our bigger name guys? There's a history with him. We've seen him go cold and then get out of it in the past. What would the ramifications be in terms of the clubhouse dynamics, even if you were to sit him down in a platoon situation? I personally don't think that would go well. Not that other key players in the team wouldn't understand why, but I wonder what his energy and his mindset would be, and if there would be any kind of, I don't know, clubhouse ramifications if Nick Castellanos became a platoon player. So I guess I'll ask you two different questions. Would you platoon him, and do you think they will?
Well, I think on paper, I would at least give it some run right now. Now, maybe he comes through and he starts to hit again. Like, he hit 2 home runs off of Spencer Strider, a righty, in that postseason game. And really, you mentioned that if you just take the NLDS, Nick Castellanos is one of the great playoff performers of all time. In that series, he is absolutely raked every single time he's played in it. And I agree, when he's going even okay, he is your best option in the outfield on an everyday basis, even with the defensive limitations. But he's not going that way right now. And yeah, I mean, you do have to consider the clubhouse ramifications. I think it's less, are other guys going to revolt, and more, is he going to have like a negative energy that kind of rubs off on other people? Clearly, they considered that. And I mean,
would it be fair to say, like, from my seat, and like full disclosure, I've not been in that clubhouse since last July, I want to say, so I have not seen the day-to-day this year. My impression would be that, and it's nothing against him as a guy. I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he wants to win. I think he's like a professional baseball player. I suspect, though, that if they were to purely platoon him, that it would not go over well with him. I get the sense that he feels like he is, I don't know, owed, but he deserves to be in the lineup every day, and that he would not see the other viewpoint, the opposing viewpoint in doing this. And I do wonder what that would mean. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yes, I do. I think if you do that, you're probably burning the bridge for next year. Like you're saying, get through this season, maybe we win it all, you get a ring, and then we'll figure what happens with the last year of the contract in the winter. Clearly, they considered the possibility of taking him out for defensive replacement earlier this year, and when he revolted, there's no other explanation. He revolted, and then they didn't do it again. So he kind of, in a way, like bullied them out of doing that. It's just, has it gotten to a point now offensively where it's overwhelming? And I think it's possible, especially now that you have Bader and Marsh is playing so well, two things you didn't have going for you back earlier this season. It has to be a consideration, but it's one that can't be done lightly because, again, he's owed $20 million next season, and you're looking at probably having to eat that. It's possible that's what this is headed towards anyways. Like maybe around that Marlins series, like they pieced it together and they'll make it work for the rest of the season and then find a resolution for everyone in the offseason that doesn't involve him playing for the Phillies next year. I think that's a distinct possibility. But certainly, I think if you platoon him for the rest of the year, you're probably saying he's not coming back next season.
Do you see Harrison Bader getting more time against right-handers as things move forward? Do you think there's sort of like a soft launch into that direction? Is that really? I know that Anthony and I have had conversations about. I'm giving it 6 days, and we're like, what the hell is that, right? Like, what do you make of that?
Well, the 6 days. Max Kepler showed enough in those 6 days to keep him on the roster and kind of fend off the Justin Crawford talk. And maybe the Phillies just don't want to bring up Justin Crawford. It's a possibility.
Yeah, that's where I was going next. I mean, it's starting to feel like they don't view him as a meaningful 2025 solution.
Well, it's a lot to ask of a guy to come up and immediately like be the answer in an outfield that has been bad, certainly by the standards of a playoff contending team. And if you want him to play every day, like I just don't know that you can justify him playing every day necessarily right now, because you have Bader, who has always been a great defender and hits pretty similarly against righties and lefties. So most days you're going to want him in there. Marsh to me is a strict platoon guy, but he's on the right side of the platoon. Like he's going to mash righties. That's what he's done. You have Castellanos, who even if you're platooning him to some degree, like he's still going to be in there most days. So, yeah, I mean, I do wonder with both Crawford and Painter now if we're just talking more about them for 2026, or maybe they come up when rosters expand, but it's not really like a big role.
Final piece of this, and you talked a little bit about it earlier with Alec Bohm coming back. I'll be careful how I go about this, but like when Bohm comes back and he's sitting in the middle of the order, there's going to be a corresponding roster move with that, right? And like Otto Kemp came up here and was like sort of a breath of fresh air. They needed a little bit of a jolt, a little bit of a youthful injection, in my opinion, and he gave that to them for a little bit. If I would have asked you 10 days ago, when Alec Bohm comes back, what is the corresponding roster move? What would you have said?
Probably Weston Wilson goes down.
And what would you say this morning?
Auto Kemp. I mean, I think it feels similarly to Derek Hall in 2022 to a degree, and this is what you need. And I think the Phillies lacked it last year. Like 2022, they acquired Brandon Marsh in August, and even though he had been in the majors, it was like this youthful energy that came in. 2023, they had Johan Rojas come up, and the athleticism and excited to get to the park that provided a spark. They really didn't have that last year. This year they had Kemp come up. You get another boost with Duran and Bader coming in after the trade deadline. So, I'm not saying Otto Kemp won't play for the Phillies again. He'll be back up in September, but I think right now it's fairly clear that Weston Wilson is the better option. And I said all along, I think Weston Wilson is much better than the player we saw the first half of this season. And the guy that mashed lefties in the second half of last season, there's a real value for that, especially if you're platooning in the outfield. And I would say the thing that maybe separated Kemp is that he was playing third base, and Weston Wilson can play third base too. He's kind of a positionless guy, but increasingly it feels like Otto Kemp is not really a strong option defensively at third base. So I think if you're going bat wise, to me, it's a relatively easy decision right now that Kemp goes down.
All right. So at the top of this, I said we're in a position in this moment where it is very easy to get swept away in what is happening and saying, wow, look at these guys go. They're coming up with big late game hits. They're doing the things that we've been waiting on them to do all year. You, as I've noted, are very level-headed. I think that you are immune to getting caught up in those things. So I will put you on the spot here and ask you this. How do you see this unfolding for the Phillies this season? Like, I guess I'm not going to ask you to design your entire playoff bracket and tell me how it goes, but you think this team has – I'll actually go a little bit further and really put you on the spot. Like, how far is this team going?
Well, for much of the season, to me, it felt like it was going to have a similar end to last year where you get into the playoffs. Maybe you win the wild card round if you play in the wild card round, but then you're out by the DS. I no longer necessarily think that. Like, to me, I see how well the Brewers are playing. You can't tell me, though, in a playoff series where you have Zach Wheeler and Christopher Sanchez that you're not going to take the Phillies to beat the Brewers. The Mets are playing awfully right now. The Dodgers, I get they won the World Series last year without pitching, but that's not like a normal occurrence. I shouldn't say pitching because their bullpen was great, but without starting pitching. And you can't just go into the playoffs every year completely uncertain who any of your starters are going to be and win. And even like as good as Ohtani's pitching, what is he going to go max 4 innings, like 5 innings? You're going to have the clear advantage starting pitching, and now you have something bullpen wise. So I think for the first time they were always a World Series contender in the broad sense. But if you had made me before the trade deadline pick my top 5 teams most likely to win the World Series, I probably wouldn't have had the Phillies in. They would have been close to number 5, but probably on the outside looking in. Now I think they're right in that 1, 2, 3, 4 mix.
I know that there's this idea that you get into the playoffs, it's all about momentum. Playing in that opening round really it can be a benefit. I don't buy it. Like I really think if talking about the Phillies getting to the World Series comes down to this for me, the real question is, can the Phillies get the 1 or 2 seed, as Kyle asks here in the stream? That to me is the key. Like if you can get that buy, then I start to buy it. I just don't know. I still come back to this. I feel what you feel right now. I look at the rotation. I see the flaws in the rest of the National League. I see a rebuilt bullpen that I can buy into. I see an emergence of Bryson Stott, who's been really good over the last 15 games or so. I can start to talk myself into a lot of it. Where I just fall a little bit short with them, and I get it because I'm not looking at the flaws of each of their potential opponents, but I just can't get over, like, can you win a wild card round, a DS, a CS, and then a World Series with some combination of Alec Boehm and Nick Castellanos protecting Bryce Harper? I don't think you can do it. I just don't see it. And I know that I'm taking JT Realmuto out of the equation. He's been the second best hitting catcher in baseball now for about 2.5 months. And
and Brandon Marsh. Yeah.
And Marsh has been really good. Like I see it, I get it. I feel like I've been and I think a lot of people feel like this. We've been down this road before with these guys and these playoff series, and the magic runs out. But if they can get through if they can get that bye, I do start to think it becomes a very, very real possibility.
Well, you're going to have to win some games 2-1, which I don't think you certainly weren't capable of doing it earlier this season. Last year, going into the playoffs, I thought they would be capable of to a degree, and the entire bullpen, Estevez, Hoffman, and Strom, kind of imploded in the playoffs last year. So obviously, you need that not to happen this year. But Duran is a game changer back there, and then you have Kerkering, Strom, and some other guys that you're gonna have to piece it together. But it's a lot easier to do that if Zach Wheeler or Christopher Sanchez goes 7 innings. The one storyline that I think is going to reemerge, and I have a feeling baseball coach Bob and fan Bob have a different opinion on this. The Phillies are going to end up playing games at 4 and 5 o'clock. There are going to be shadows at Citizens Bank Park again. And I know people don't like to hear it, but like I was at the opening day game where Mackenzie Gore was pitching, game 1 of the Mets series last year. Zach Wheeler was pitching well that day. I've seen Zach Wheeler make 15 or 20 better starts than that, but he got 34 swings and misses. Like, they're going to have to pray that they're cloudy days at Citizens Bank Park in the playoffs, or you're talking about the same storylines as last year.
Absolutely nobody wants to hear that. It is very real. It is very, you're right. There are conflicting opinions in my own mind. Like the fan in you says, give me a break. I don't want to hear it. The reality of it is that makes it much, much harder. And you're right. It's interesting. Like that was the storyline at the end of last year. Game 1 with Gore. It was like all anybody talked about. And then it's like we all just forgot about it after that Washington series. Like that storyline went away.
Well, and there's nothing you can really do about it. Like I remember people being like, well, why weren't the Phillies out here at 4 o'clock the day before? They were. It was cloudy that day. And
what is the path to them avoiding that time slot? Is it the Yankees? Like the Yankees cannot make the playoffs, right? Like
no, the path is the Dodgers don't make the because the Dodgers are getting the night game.
Dodgers are going to get the late game.
Yeah, it's the Dodgers so maybe you're going to have to win a series. Like I guess if you play the Cubs, like would they move the Dodgers to 5 o'clock and have Cubs Phillies late? Maybe. I mean, time zone wise, it doesn't make sense, but would that be a more appealing matchup nationally, potentially? So, yeah, you're gonna have to get some luck or hope it's
the Phillies beat the Shadows. That's going to be
the entire month of October.
Oh my God. All right. Well, on that note, everybody can have some anxiety over that, and can't leave feeling totally good about this thing. All right, Tim, thanks for jumping on with us here. Just a quick show note. Anthony, I believe this is the longest Key West vacation in the history of the world, by the way. I don't know if you've ever been to Key West. I have. It's awesome. I've been down there. I think it was 4 nights I did. And by the last night, I know you make your choices down there and all, but by the last night, it was time to go home. So I could not possibly imagine doing 7 days down there. But he, I believe, is coming back north tomorrow night. So we will do our normally scheduled stuff beginning again on Friday. We're through vacation season here. Tim, I think we need to have you back. Maybe bring in a little like 3-man rotation here at times. I really appreciate you doing this, giving up your time to do it, and giving people a show today. Make sure that you follow Tim on Pattison.com. You can follow him on X at Tim Kelly Sports, as you see on the screen there if you're watching this live. For Bob Wankel, for Tim Kelly, I'm Bob Wankel, and we'll talk to you guys on Friday.